Hi, in this tutorial I will show how to get detailed information out of an existing GSA model using GSA Grasshopper. So first off, I'm going to open the model using an open model component. Click the open button here and select the model that I want to look at. I also have this model open in GSA. So I've opened up GSA here and I want to pick one of the members. Let's pick this one. It's number 96. Then I want to look at what property it has been assigned, so one of the 2D properties. And then I want to look into the properties of the material, which is one of these advanced custom materials. And I want to find these values. So what I do first is to open the geometry using a getGeometry component. I input the GSA parameter into the GSA input here, and I opened up the entire model. We wanted to find the information about a 2D member. So if I hover over the outputs here, I can see that there's 3 2D members in this model, number 95, 96, and 97. So if I use an item component just to pick the right one, you can see that it's not the first one. It looks like it's the second one instead. And number 2 is the third one, so number 1 is the second. That makes sense, right? So selected that one, and now what I can do is go to the Geometry tab and select Edit 2D Member. So the output here is a 2D member, and so I just use the item component here to filter, and the input here is the number 96 2D member, and I can now start to have a look here on the right hand side of all the information that's available in the model or in that object. So if I just grab a panel component here to have a quick look what's available, so we have a ID, which is an integer for 96 for the ID. Also we have the brep, so that's the underlying surface, which we can see being highlighted here. We have inclusion points and inclusion curves, if there are any. There are 2 inclusion curves. And then there's the section property, which is part of this object. So I can now go over to the Properties tab, and I can find Edit 2D Property. So now I'm in another layer underneath this object. So this object, the 2D member, contains information about its property. So in here I can see again the ID. So the property ID PA is number 2. I can see the material. I can see information about the thickness, the axes, name, color, and type. So just to check that that's what's actually also selected in GSA, we can go in here, we can find members, we can go down to 96. This is the property, so it's property 2, and we can see the topology and so on. Okay, so it's property 2 that's assigned to a member number 96. So if we go into properties, 2D properties, select property number 2, we can see here the axis is number 2. Let's see if that's correct. Yes, axis number 2. See the name, they're all called property 2D property, but 2D property 1, 2, 3. So we can check that it's 2D property 2. Color and type doesn't really matter. Type is shell. Yes, it's also shell. More importantly probably is the profile or the thickness in this case. So the thickness should be 30 centimeters. Great, that is what it is. This is a so-called unit number. I can this is with units, so if I want to change this to some other unit, I can right click on the middle of this component, go to select unit, and then I can select the output that I want to be. You can also see it displayed down here. This is now in centimeters, but if I wanted to change that, I can go into millimeters. We'll change it to 300 millimeters. And meters, even American units. And I can use the number parameter to get the actual number out. So if I pass it into a number component parameter here, you can see that it's casting it automatically. And we could also see that this number actually is has many trailing digits after the comma. So yeah, we can get all of that out. Now the second thing I wanted to do was to look at the material and find the material properties. So first we had the 2D member that had the property, and then that property has another information stored in it, which is the material. So we can go in and use the edit material component to look at that in more detail. So the analysis property is 1. The material type is concrete, and the grade is set to 0 because it's not a standard grade. It's a custom material. And if I want to get the material properties from this, I can use the material properties component. This just takes a material input, so I could also drag that directly from here. And we can have a little look at the output. I'm just going to copy my text box over here. So we have Young's modulus of 14,000 megapascal. Poisson's ratio is 0.2. The density is 2400 kilograms per cubic meter. And the temperature thermal expansion coefficient we can also get. So let's just have a look if that's also what's in the material properties. So it was property number 1. You can see that's 1.4 to the power of 10. So that's 1400 megapascal. You can see the Poisson's ratio is 0.2, density 2400, and the thermal expansion. Again, we can right click on this component and we can change the units. So let's say we want to have the stress out in gigapascal, or in Pascal as it was in GSA. We can change that to Pascal, 1.4 to the power of 10, 1.4 power of 10. I don't like looking at Pascal, it's too small for me. Gigapascal sounds reasonable for Young's modulus. I can change it to gigapascal. You can see it's 14 gigapascal. That was a quick introduction and to getting more detailed information out of an existing model. So we took one 2D member out, and we could see that inside this object we have different layers. We first have a 2D property. Inside that 2D property we can get the thickness, and we can also get the material. So in another layer we have the material, and from that material we can get the material properties belonging to the top level 2D member.